It never was exactly like I imagined it would be. I had this picture, this vision in my head that we would all sit around the dinner table and we would have fresh chocolate chip cookies every time we came home from school, and we would all have these wonderful conversations. And maybe after the move we had 10 or 12 of those events. It was never like I imagined it would be, but I really wish it had been. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Dinner. Around the dinner table. Who would have thought?
Master the Story Power Method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Hey, real quick here, I want to remind you of the Kingdom Cohort. If you're not already involved in the Kingdom Cohort, get signed up now. You're going to go through 6 weeks of story power training to learn how to master your stories. You're going to go through 6 weeks of attitude hack training, which will teach you how, whether it's corporate environment, in your church, or in your family, to build leadership, brand, and culture. Then you're going to go through Lead the Narrative to help you identify the false ideas that are out there that are damaging our society, our brand, and our culture, not only to identify them, but also to counter them. If that sounds like a great challenge for you, I want you to jump in to the Narrative Warrior Kingdom Cohort. Do it now.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at storypoweracademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. I was probably 10, maybe not quite 11 years old when my stepdad was killed in a car accident. And very shortly after that, our world was kind of upended. All the friends we knew from school, the places we'd been in the first several years of our life, all the habits and the practices and the norm, if you will. There had been some changes as time had gone. Anyway, as I grew up and in his eyes was closer to manhood, the responsibilities shifted. I was now responsible for the yard and my sister's responsible for the dishes and little things like that. But there was some rhythm, some consistency to our life, and then he was gone. And when he was gone, and my mom got the insurance settlement, one of her first notions was, I need to be around family again. I need to be supported by people immediately around me. And there was nobody where we were in Enid except the people that we went to school with. Maybe the baseball team moms. I don't know what kind of relationship she had with them. Some of the people they talked to on the CB radio, that was about the extent of it. But in one hometown, her mother, her stepfather, her sisters, her brothers, everybody in one place. And so we packed up. She took the money and bought a car, bought a van, and bought a house. And we moved into this house. And there was something in my mind, something in my imagination that said, when our family, our nucleus, my mom, recently widowed, my older sister, myself, and my younger sister, when we get into this new house, I mean, we had all new furniture, we had a brand new house, you could still smell the glue under the carpet. It was that brand new. It had never happened in our family before. And I thought, I'll go to school every morning, mom will drop us off at the bus or at the school, whatever that looks like, and then every day we'll come home, and when we walk in the door, there'll be fresh chocolate chip cookies, and we'll sit down at the table together and do our homework, and then we'll have dinner together, and then watch a movie or something, and then go to bed and get up and do it again every day. And I really longed for that rhythm. It never really happened. I mean, there were times that we sat around the table and mom played cards with friends, and family came over, and little things like that. We had some holiday meals there, but it wasn't long after buying the house and buying the car that mom had to go back to work. And when she went back to work, that kind of threw our schedule off. It wasn't long before my sister was driving us to school, and that threw our schedule off a little bit more. And then, I was 14, I think, when I got my first job sacking groceries. I had my own keys to the house, my own keys to the car, and I came and went as I pleased long before I was an adult. But see, the influences in my life were my football coaches. I tried baseball. It didn't work for me in middle school after I had done it as a kid. But I really only plugged in with a little bit of people at church and a little bit of people on the football team and my coaches. And that was it. That was the extent of the influence in my life. My uncles, they spoke into my life. But there was no cohesive, this is who you should be. This is what it means. I remember sitting on the tailgate with my uncle one time. And I said to him, what is a real man? I think I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I said, what is a real man? And he said, well, John Wayne's a real man. You know, he gets what he wants out of life. He tells people how it's going to be. He stands up for himself. He's nice to women most of the time, but not always. But he always tells the truth, and he always does the right thing. And, you know, John Wayne being the Duke, the character larger than life in that season of my life, that was a pretty clear picture. Whether you 100% agree with that's what a real man should be or not, that's a different thing. But that's really what today's episode is really about. I want you to think what it means when you have that moment as a father, as a mother, as a parent, as a grandparent, to answer those direct, challenging questions that all young people ask. One of my girls was probably 5 or 6 when she asked me, is it okay for a girl to marry a girl? Well, I have my own opinions of that. I have my own ideas of that. And my first thought was, where does she even come up with a question like that at 5? But she's a long way from having boyfriends and girlfriends, a long way from getting married, I hope, at 5? At 5? But see, these questions are already in their mind. And the question I want to challenge you with is, who's answering them? Who's answering them? See, the concept of the home fire, the dinner table, the sitting around in the living room and having those conversations, the idea that back when those values, those concepts, those notions, those ideologies, those worldviews were expanded within a family realm because the primary influence in the life of a child, the thinking of a child, the molding of their ideologies, well, it came from the parents. And often from the parents and the grandparents. It was generational, 2, 3, 4 generations. Now, if you have an issue with that thought today, I understand you might look at some of the elites of the world and say, well, you know, the Rockefellers as an example, the Carnegies as an example. There are a whole lot of families with great long legacies in banking, in finance, in world governments. The Schwabs, the investment company, and Klaus Schwab of WEF, who just handed his global empire, if you will, his global influence empire down to his son, who has some ideas that I look at and go, whoa, hold on. You take care of your family and stay out of mine. Just my opinion. But I challenge you to ask yourself, if you look at some of the global elites, some of the global education impacts, some of the global ideologies, the ones that have been pushed to the top, they rise to the surface, they get the most noise, they get the most social media and media attention, they get the most verbosity, and they often get the impact of policy and law behind them. You will do what we tell you to, or there will be a price to pay. Those ideologies are often very narrow in their purpose, their intent, their outcome. They serve a certain group of people and not everybody. It's why the old phrase, the rich get rich and the poor go broke, came around. There are people who have intentionally crafted policies to make sure that a certain amount of money doesn't end up in a certain place. I had a chance to watch a film last night called Sarah's Oil. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Sarah's Oil talks about a young girl who received a grant from the government. That grant gave her 160 acres of land. And she believed there was oil on that land, while everybody told her, no, there's not. She had one advantage that many in her family didn't have, and many in her neighborhood didn't have, and that was someone taught her to read. And her ability to read made it really hard to fool her. Her ability to read made it really hard to lie to her, to steal from her, to manipulate her. Oh, they tried. All the way up to the courts, they tried to take advantage of her, to rob her of her land, because while they told her there was no oil on that land, they discovered she was right. There's a lot of oil on that land. And if you watch the film, you'll see what we know to be repeated history. See, Sarah, her family, the family around her, came from a slave population. And she wasn't, until her generation, her parents were not allowed to read. They weren't allowed to be taught. Previous to that, just educating a person of color could be a death sentence for them and the person educating them. But see, we can go back a few thousand years. The Samaritans had the same problem. The Jews didn't want them educated. When Jesus met the woman at the well and she said, so are we supposed to do it over here? Or are we supposed to do it over there? Jesus said, you're ignorant. You've been misled. You've been lied to. You don't have the proper information, and sadly, it's intentional. We're not in a different place today. There are still those who would say, let me control the education, let me control the amount of information that you have, let me control the quality, the depth, and the accuracy of that information. In fact, if I have to, I'll change that information just to make sure that, well, what I want you to know is what you know, that you have access only to the information that I want you to have. See, these family legacies, these family learnings, these inheritances of wisdom and knowledge, they get diluted really, really fast. They get diluted in the classroom. They get diluted by peers who think they know, but they don't really fully understand. They get diluted by peers who have access to other information, but understand, especially with peers. A bunch of 9-year-olds. The smartest one in the room is still 9 if the teacher walks out. But the smartest one in the room who's been given access to information may actually be getting good information, and yet the old telephone game still applies. If I tell you and then you tell your friend and then they tell their friend, by the time you got to 4 or 5 people, what was said was actually different, which is one of the reasons that I like books. I like books because if I read it and I remember it wrong, I can go back and look again. If I read it and I understand it a certain way, I can take it to somebody else and say, so what do you think of this? And they don't get my opinion only, they get the original text, the original concept. I'm holding in my book, I'm holding in my hand a book. I'm not holding in my book a hand, I am actually I'm holding in my hand a book called Poise, How to Attain It, by D. Starkey. Now, this is from the Mental Efficiency series. This book was written in 1916. Funk and Wagnall Company, 1916. And on page 57, he says, under a heading, War on Timidity. We have seen how his craving for sympathy, never satisfied, so he does not make it known, drives him ever into an impotent rage, which throws him back upon himself in a scarcely concealed irritation. That alienates him from all sympathy and precludes all confidences. It's rarely, therefore, that the timid person does not find himself isolated when facing the decisions of greater or lesser gravity that daily life makes necessary, in terror of making a mistake that may lead to some change of course or give rise to the necessity of taking some definite action. He hesitates everlastingly. Okay, I can modernize that in a sentence or two and say, look, when you're bashful and afraid that people are going to judge your decisions, you tend not to make them. There's a whole lot of intellect buried in that book right there. There's a whole lot of wisdom buried in that book right there. There's a whole lot of 110-year-old understanding of the human psyche that today we're being misled about. Recently, there was a study that had been done a few years ago that said if you take a certain body posture, the neurons in your body change to match that body posture. Therefore, it's not just a body posture, It's an emotion, it's a feeling, it's a psychology that all changes in conjunction with that. And the study came out and sold millions of books, and hundreds of thousands of people have adopted this policy and moved into this place. And then just recently, science came out and said, well, actually, no. The study was flawed, and there's no evidence that this changes your neurology. It might make you feel better, and the oxygen that you get into your body when you put your hands on your hip and take a deep breath, that might change some things. But there's no proof that the neurology changes by just doing this. Which one do you trust? The original study and all of the books that were sold and all the people who adopted that idea, or the new study? I don't know. If you went back 110 years, would you find it be consistent? If you went back 110 years and asked the question, what is a man? Would you get a different answer than you would today? I mean, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? That's a question that the Supreme Court wrestles with today. How do we know? Because when brought into the Supreme Court, one of the justices was asked the question, what is a woman? And the answer was, I'm not a scientist. No, but you're a mom. I would think you would know the answer to that question as a mom. I know, some people look at that and go, you're so opinionated. I get it, I'm sorry. I am a little opinionated. I also tend to read old books where it seemed like that was 110 years ago, that was settled science. Today, all of a sudden, we've got these new opinions that disagree with, wait, what is science? Didn't he have a name? Never mind. I have another book here. Speaking of how things change and yet they tend to stay the same. Now this book is so small that I literally have to use the camera on my phone. I'm magnifying. It's not just that I'm old. I want you to look. See, the camera can barely even focus on that. See how little those words are? So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use my phone, not because I'm reading something different. I'm just reading from this dictionary printed in 1903. In 1903, the word communism was defined as community of property, doctrine of a system of things in common, communist, one who advocates equal sharing of property, a socialist. I didn't make that up. It's right here in the book. It's on page, holy cow, that's small. It's on page 88 in a 1903 dictionary. The word communist and socialist are the same word according to the dictionary. If you're a communist, you're a socialist. I'm not saying that. The book is saying that. Okay. So some would label me and say I'm a conservative. So here's what in 1903, a conservative. This is what a conservative was. The word Christian national is not in here. I'm sorry, I looked. But conservative. Conservative says, tending to or desiring to preserve. One who opposes innovations and desires to keep intact laws intact. Institutions, social usages, and customs consecrated by time. Conservatism, a system of principles. I'm okay with that definition. Maybe you're not okay with the definition of communism, but hey, it was 1903. What was going on in the world in 1903? Wasn't that the beginning of World War I? I don't know. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, or so they say. I don't know. Oh, speaking of history, this book was published in 1963. It's called The Boy of Prague. If you were sitting around your dining room table, sitting around in your living room and perusing through these old books, do you think the question, what is a man, would take on a different nature in your living room than it might in a Supreme Court trial? Page 4. 4. We're not deep into the book. We're on page 4. A Boy from Prague, 1963. One year, everything went so well that we had meat. Yes, we had meat 4 times that year. The tax collector nearly found out that we were cooking meat because somehow we let a little smoke get through the hole in our roof, but a neighbor ran up and warned us, and we quickly buried the pot of meat. Father suffered some damp straw into the fire, stuffed some damp straw into the fire, so we could tell him that it was the straw that smoldered. We escaped being taxed on the meat. Next day, we told the story to some other villagers, but they never let the secret out. Even my little brothers, for once, held their tongues. As soon as the dawn came up over the fields, we set out to work, splashing through the dew and the golden sunrise. The tree trunks were wet, throbbing black, but their upper branches were drawn in gold. This is a kid's storybook. I can tell, because the font is enormous. A kid's storybook telling the story of what it was like on the other side of the wall in Prague, around the time that communism and socialism dominated the landscape. Perhaps the 1903 understanding of what communism, socialism is as an interchangeable word. Perhaps the life lived by a little boy who's telling the story of what it was like to live there. Perhaps that would change the opinion that so many of our social media tools today tend to manipulate. I mean, I hate to say it, but if your kids have 2 or 3 hours of screen time every day, and 6 to 8 hours of classroom time every day, and an hour or 2 on the school bus every day, most of their decision-making process isn't informed by the history that has happened. In fact, one of the first things you'll notice about a totalitarian of any sort is they like to erase history. They don't want you to know the way things were. Why? Well, because things haven't always been this way and things won't always be this way. That's true on the good side and the bad side. No matter how bad it gets, it hasn't always been this way and it won't always be this way. And no matter how good it is, it hasn't always been this way and it won't always be this way. And that's what we need books for. That's what we need to study for. That's what we need to have these conversations with our kids for. Because 2 hours on the bus, 8 hours in the classroom, 2 hours on social media, and I promise you, the thoughts, the notions, the ideas that are being delivered into their minds subconsciously and consciously, the conversations that they repeat should tell you everything. Listen to your kids while they're playing video games and they don't think you're listening. Listen to the language, the way they reply to each other, the questions they ask each other, and you're going to find that if you're not sitting around the table with them at breakfast, sitting around the table with them at lunch, sitting around the table with them at dinner, there's a whole lot of people who do not have your child's best interest at heart, who do not have your worldview, your ideologies in mind. There are a lot of people who have their own initiatives, their own outcomes, their own agendas that they will subtly, nefariously slip into the conversation. What is the meaning of is? See, these seem harmless. But when you think about the narrative that's driving the behavior, perhaps Thomas Jefferson was right. The philosophy of the schoolroom in this generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next. When I see these 20-somethings walk up and down the beach on spring break, and they just ask them, hey, read this. And it's a children's book, or it's a postcard with, a couple of 6-syllable words on it. And the high school graduates, the college students, can't read a 6-syllable word without the help of a digital device. I don't know if you know this or not. I do it on a regular basis just for giggles now. I'll take something that I've written and drop it into the digital device and ask, how would you re-say this? And it's often that what it says back has manipulated the meaning of what I said. What if that's happening in your house? What if that's happening with your kids? What if the ideas that you espouse play telephone, and one person in the game of telephone, one person in the circle who's repeating what they heard has zero intention of repeating what they heard, but instead would rather install or instill a new idea? 8 hours in the classroom, 2 hours on the bus, 2 hours on social media. You're at 12 hours. If they sleep for 8, you're at 20. It gives you 4 hours. 4 hours. 4 hours a day to have one-on-one time with your kids, to have family time with your kids, to sit around the table, whether it's board games or Uno or whatever it is, and have those conversations that matter to them today, tomorrow, and with their kids. We spend time with our grandkids every chance we get. We have conversations with them anytime they're allowed. I have one grandson who has more speaking trophies than I do, who has more debate trophies than I do, who's also a pretty high-class chess player. He's worth investing in. Not just what social media has to say, not just what foreign actors might want to install through TikTok or other social media tools, not just the peer pressure of kids the same age who want to make fun because he's smarter than them but doesn't look and act like them. No, he's worth investing in. Old books, genuine time, real conversation. And so are your kids. Do you mentor at a high school? Do you lead a small group? Do you speak into the lives of kids that stay around your kids? Are you impacting their peers? The opportunity to shape the world is now. The chance that you have to speak into the lives of those who will be tomorrow's leaders, tomorrow's doctors and lawyers and politicians, tomorrow's elected officials, tomorrow's local community law enforcement. You have the chance to shape the way they think right now. Will it be corrupt or will it be strong? Will it be righteous? Will it be forthright? Will it be anchored in the known truth or the ambiguous future? The answer to that question is up to you. Are you a narrative warrior? Or are you sitting idly by watching the world lead us back to Prague? I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcasts for Tell It Like It Is TV and Story Power Academy. Have a blessed day. Real quick reminder, Narrative Warrior Kingdom Cohort. We're in our first go around right now. 18 weeks from now, we will have our first graduates. Narrative warriors ready to combat the lies that are going on in our culture and our society and have a story that answers the challenge. Are you in?
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at Story Power Academy.